Hey, y'all. Thanks for tuning back in to Fishing for Men as we continue to look at our Jesus crucifixion story as an unexpected coronation. For this episode, tonight I have with me...
Cody's here.
And Brandon. We got a bit of a small crew.
Yeah,
tonight.
Just the three of us tonight, and this is Billy. We're going to start off with a fun question today, which is, what is your favorite dessert?
Ooh.
Anything with chocolate.
And like anything with chocolate? Is it really just chocolate that's your favorite?
Yeah, but like
or does it need to be paired with something?
It doesn't have to be paired.
Okay.
But I like something more than just a bar of chocolate.
Okay.
But I would eat that bar of chocolate. And if I'm desperate, I'll go for the bag of chocolate chips.
Yeah. And melt it and then put it on some like fruit.
Ice cream would be better.
Okay,
but
that's fair.
That's fair. It's not bad.
That's fair.
I'm a big fan of the brownie with the hot fudge and the chocolate.
Yes.
And the ice cream.
Vanilla.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's good.
Big fan of that. If you put it on a hot skillet,
Oh yeah.
deliver it to my table, that'd be
a
awesome.
bazooki.
Yeah.
At one point we had one of those. It was a cookie size cast iron that
Excellent.
Katie bought me.
Your love language.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Desserts is let's just say I don't discriminate against any dessert.
Right?
I'll take pretty much anything you put in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of creme brulee.
Oh, okay.
We do. We have the bowls to make it,
Nice.
which we've
The
made
little
before, and we have the torch to toast the sugar.
Billy has
on
all the
top.
cooking toys, I just want to say. Your meat slicer you recently acquired.
The deli slicer.
Yeah.
We used it 2 nights ago. No, last night. Yeah, last night we made pho, and so you gotta have the thin sliced beef to put in there. So we used it then.
Cut it really nice and thin with that
Yep.
slicer.
Yeah, no, there's not many desserts that I'll say no to. Creme brulee is a big one, but I'm more of a fruit dessert person.
Fruit dessert.
So like that's why I kind of like the creme brulee. You can put some fruit on top.
Gotcha.
Like even for candies or anything like that, fruit's always my thing.
Yeah.
Not Katie's the chocolate person.
She's the chocolate.
She's the chocolate person. Chocolate cake is her jam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But she is a big creme brulee fan. So hopefully we'll have some more of these fun questions just so you guys can get to know us a little bit more. We're not just some random voice sitting behind a mic that you might be listening to. So
all I do is read my Bible 24/7.
if only that was our job.
While
Brandon.
shoving my face with chocolate.
Yeah. We could probably have AI create a picture of that.
Why don't you do that and post it?
Well, stay tuned, listeners. We may have to find a picture or have AI create one of us, Brandon, of him reading his Bible 24/7 with chocolate.
Face shoved with chocolate. Weighing like 350 pounds.
No, but you work out, so you'll be nice and fit, but you just like your chocolate. So last episode we started walking through Mark 15, and how he was writing Jesus' crucifixion as a coronation. That was very similar to the coronation of Caesar. Then today we're going to be looking at sort of the second half of those steps that Brandon walked us through. If you missed the first couple of episodes, I strongly encourage you to go back and listen to them. There's a lot of context in there, lots of good details and information about kind of what led up to this story. And then we also worked through the first 4 steps, I think, in the last episode. So definitely worth going back to listen to just to help set the stage for what we'll continue to talk about today. And the passage we're going to be spending our time in specifically is Mark 15, 22 through 39. But before we do that, as we read through Mark and discuss it, I want you to pretend that you're a Greco-Roman citizen. I want you to forget if you've heard the Jesus story once, twice, 100 times. Maybe you've grown up in the church, you've heard this multiple times. I want you to try and forget all of that. And I want you to take the worldview of a first century Greco-Roman citizen. And if you don't know what that is, this is kind of the worldview they had. One is polytheistic. They were religious syncretism focused, so they would just take religions and blend them all together and kind of fit into whatever they liked out of each of them or fit them into their culture.
How many didn't Rome have
Oh,
a bunch
gosh.
of official religions?
Yeah. So I think they had like a bunch of, I don't know what the official religion was, but I know they had like specific gods for like water and different things. So, but Brandon's probably going to go look that up for
I'm
us.
looking that up for us.
They also were, they were focused on emperor worship, which was a little bit different. So in their time, kings and emperors were deified. They were gods. They came from God, which was kind of interesting. They also believed in a hierarchy, I can never say this word, hierarchical. We're just going to go with that part, society. And you couldn't move between classes. You kind of looked down upon the classes that were below you, and you were stuck in the class that you were born into. There was also a huge focus on power, strength, conquest in Rome. Basically, their strategy was comply to the way that we do things, or we're just going to take you out. And they also had a huge desire just to seek their own pleasure in everything that they did. And so I guess the first question I have for you guys is, how much does this culture sound like today's culture?
Similar to much of it.
Especially the second half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say polytheistic. Right?
I don't know. I feel like Hindu's kind of starting to take off a little bit of just because I think people are looking for that spirituality. But within Hinduism, there's really no lines. There's no border you got to stay in. It's, I like this.
Do you think that ties into the you do you and not offending people?
Yeah, for sure. And I actually, as I was kind of looking into these, honestly, the emperor worship stuck out to me a lot.
President worship?
Yeah, absolutely.
Heads of state worship?
Yeah, like we put our faith in the people who lead our country.
Or even like president would be one thing, leaders like that, but I would also tie it into like leaders in Hollywood.
Oh, for sure.
Cultural icons.
Oh, absolutely. Athletes, movie
and their
movie
girlfriends.
actors, girlfriends, like all the things.
Yeah.
The music industry, like there's a lot of things that maybe we don't realize we worship that we do.
Yep.
So as we read through this, keep this context in your mind, and we're gonna what we're gonna do today is we're gonna read straight through Mark 15:22 through 39. And then we're just going to have a bunch of questions that we're just going to kind of walk through, specifically the steps, but obviously if there's anything else that comes to mind, like just note it down, call it out, and just try to make this one big conversation. So Mark 15:22, they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Then they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it, and they crucified him. Dividing up his clothes, they cast lots to see what each would get. It was 9 a.m. when he was crucified. The written notice of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." They crucified 2 rebels with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their head and saying, "So, you are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days? Come down from the cross and save yourself." In the same way, the chief priests and the teachers of the law mocked him among themselves. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. Let this Messiah, the King of Israel, come down now from the cross, that we may see and believe." Those crucified with him also heaped insults on him. At noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, and at 3 p.m, Jesus cried out loud in a voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani." That's probably butchered. That's okay. Which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing near heard this, they said, "Listen, he's calling Elijah." Someone ran, filled a sponge with wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah will come and take him down," he said. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last breath. The curtain of the temple torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus saw that he had died, he said, "Surely This was the man of God. There's 5 steps because there's 9 total. The first one that we're going to do, or just kind of look at, is step number 5, which is Caesar arrives at Capitol Hill. Where do you see this sort of corresponding to Mark's rendition?
Verse 22.
Yes.
Yep, right at
Place
the
of the
beginning.
school.
Absolutely. There's a lot of debate about this place on what it means and what's there. It could also have been a place that they actually did a lot of the crucifixions, which is also why it was called the place of the skull. I've heard that the meaning of that doesn't actually mean place of the skull, but there's maybe some symbolic resemblance of that. Or even just a lot of bad things happened there of like prostitution, bad trading, like there's a place of quote unquote death too. So
Can I
go
take
for
us
it.
down a rabbit trail or two on this one?
that's what you're here for, Brandon.
Okay.
Take us down some rabbit trails.
Good. Starting off with what we're looking at in Mark and comparing it to Caesar. So they took him to the hill that was skull meaning head, right? So in the story of Caesar, he was led up to Capitoline Hill. So has anyone in this room ever been to Rome?
No, I want to though.
No, I've not.
I've been to Milan, but not Rome. Close, but not quite there. But it's called the City of Seven Hills. So there's these hills down there, and Capitoline Hill was like the main one. It's where they had the temple to Jupiter, and Jupiter was the king of the gods in Roman culture. So that was like the fitting place for Caesar to be crowned Caesar. And so it's Mark's trying to draw this comparison of like, if you think capital, like the word Capitoline, it's caput in Latin means head. So you got this parallel between head and head, that they're both being led up to this place that has the same meaning behind it, where they're going to be crowned, right? So that's cool.
What I think is interesting about that is like one is a place of honor and one is a place of like you don't want to be there.
It's the opposite, right?
Yeah.
And I think, as even in the last episode where as Jesus was walking down the road, we saw so in the story of Caesar's walking out front and then the sacrifice is behind him. And in Jesus' story, that starts to like reverse. You're like, wait, which is he here? So it like starts off and then all of a sudden you see it kind of like turned upside down. Like you see the negative things like, wait, this isn't.
Yeah, is he criminal or is he king?
Yeah.
Like those are the two roles that are now clashing.
Yeah. So that's the directly related one, but you kind of were talking about that, what that place was and stuff, and I found a lot of cool info on like what Golgotha is thought to have been and where it came from. So apparently the word Golgotha, and meaning like head or skull, is tied back like to beginning of the Old Testament, not Genesis. Sorry, guys. But like I think it was Leviticus, if I can remember correctly.
Nobody's doing a study on that one yet.
No.
Hey, are you up for it, Cody? You're going to do Leviticus for us?
Jump in.
Okay. No, but so God talks about having Moses take a census of the people, right? And that word that's used for census is raising up of the heads, like to go count them. And so that word head is tied into that.
Nice.
So it sounds like there's a connection in like Jerusalem outside of the city along one of the main roads is where this is supposedly at, this spot is at. And so that was a place where everyone was passed through. And so when it came time to take a census, they could easily count people as they passed by. So that's kind of where it supposedly got his name from. The other cool thing about the census that ties into Jesus' story is one of the reasons for taking a census in ancient Israel was they would collect a quote unquote ransom from all the males that were 20 years and older. So you have this connection with the word head. You also have this connection with the word ransom in the background. Then this spot of Golgotha, like I said, it was along this main road. And so the Romans chose to carry out the crucifixions there so that it was very public. So that people coming in and out of the city would see it. It's like, don't mess with Rome or this is what's going to happen to you.
Sure.
So you start to tie all these pieces together and like it comes together, I think, in a really cool way over the story of Jesus. So you think this is happening on the path to the gate where the temple where God is. So what did Jesus says in John 4:16, no one comes to the Father except through me. Yeah, so you have this image of that.
Okay.
Then it's also the place of the skull where heads are counted for the census, where the ransom is paid. And you think about Jesus paying for the ransom for our sin. Like I started finding these things and I was like, this is pretty cool. But this is the stuff that I love about the Bible just in general. Granted, I don't have time every day when I'm reading through the Bible to go research this stuff. But when you do, there's like all this really cool stuff that's just like, what? You know, no clue any of that was there.
No, like if you don't spend some time just kind of like just digging a little bit. And it just starts with one article that kind of spurs into like a couple of others. And I think, I think the big thing that maybe we just want to call out is like, ask a bunch of questions about the text. Yeah. I know I was raised where I don't know if I was necessarily encouraged to ask questions about the text. It was just, hey, this is the Bible and you should believe it. But there's a lot of weird stuff in here.
Yeah, there's some, as we get to it, there's some things that stand out in here where I'm like, why?
Yeah.
You know. Anyways.
Yeah.
Sorry, back to the story.
No, yeah, for sure. No, there's a lot of that stuff. And so just like I think we're always encouraged to like do the Bible plan in a year, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. There's a bunch of different things that are helpful from those things, but the Bible isn't like this straight line of a linear story.
No.
It's like up and then it's back down and then it's left and then it's right and then it's back up and then it's back down and then it's was it Chronicles and Samuel? They're like the same story, but they're at different perspectives. And so,
well, and not to mention like the prophets, same thing.
And so there's all these different things that, for me, it's been super beneficial to like just take a piece and study it for like the whole year, like go really slow and ask questions. And you're like, what the heck? Why do they do that? Why do they say this here? Why is this repeated 8 times? Why is this? You just start asking a bunch of questions, which is cool. And you start to see details that you never saw before, or that question leads to a piece of treasure, like Brandon kind of just talked about. So what has been your experience with reading the Bible, Cody?
Mine right now is completely not, it's like I am doing the Navigator's reading plan, but so far it's taken me a year and a half to get halfway through it, and I'm not in any sort of hurry, so I might, like, it'll have you read 4 sections each day, like 2 New Testament, a Psalm, and an Old Testament, like 2 or 3 chapters, and but I won't read all 4 one day, because something in the New Testament, something in Mark might be so interesting, I might cross-reference it to other New Testaments, but just kind of like to follow wherever my mind goes with it, looking stuff up. I mean, I've definitely read through scriptures, like just, trying to get through it to check a box or whatever. And, I'm getting so much more out of it right now just by slowing down.
Yeah. And you can tell we have a group text with the guys that's like just for stuff we've read in the Bible, and Cody throws out some like pretty deep stuff where I'm like, oh,
I never thought that.
Yeah. And this is the first time, like I used to be soaking up, all sorts of different books from different authors and pastors and things like that. Just kind of craving something to go with it. But this is the first time I've ever done it without any concordance or anything. I might glance, because I've got a study Bible, so I might glance at the notes, at the footnotes. But really, I like just going through it this time. Let the Spirit lead me through it.
That's cool.
So
Very
That's
cool.
awesome. All right. Step number 6. Caesar is offered wine mixed with myrrh. He refuses it, and he pours it out. This one is pretty clear.
Verse 23.
And, as I was kind of reading through some of this, and I guess just a cultural thing that I learned is that this was typically a drink that was offered to anybody that was going to be crucified. It was, our modern day pain medicine so that you wouldn't feel the excruciating pain, which, fun fact, the word crucifixion comes from excruciating comes from crucifixion one. Yeah, which I thought was quite interesting because
we definitely use that word.
They're quite
wrongly.
tied together. How much, I'll call it self-control, he had to just be like, you know what, I'm just going to take it all. Like, I think sometimes we don't sit in that enough to be like, how much pain was he in before he even got to the cross?
Yeah, it's
Like they had to pull him away and have Simon step in to carry the rest of it because he had the crap beat out of him.
yeah, and and just tying it back to what you were just talking to about, or what we were talking about with slowing down and looking for stuff. If anyone has ever watched the movie The Passion, it's gory, right? Like the scenes they show, but that whole process of like Jesus's crucifixion is just a couple of lines. Like we read through most of the story just now at the beginning of the episode, and it's easy to breeze past that. But if you start like slowing down and creating that picture in your head of what it might have actually been or looked like or felt like, just that alone.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a gory scene, obviously, but just like even doing that with your Bible,
Yeah,
you get so much out of it.
sitting through what he would have gone through. Like, just go look up what a typical Roman crucifixion
I don't know if I want to.
was like. Like it was brutal.
Yeah, they had it down to a science how to torture somebody.
Maximize pain.
They had no no problem making you make sure that you felt every bit of it. Like there's even a bunch of science behind why they did the crucifixion because of how you actually had to push yourself up. You'd actually have to use the nail that's in your feet and then actually pull yourself up with the 2 nails that are in your hands, which would actually pinch something in your lungs, which actually you could breathe out, but it would actually make it really difficult to breathe in. And so it was actually anytime you wanted a breath, you would have to lift yourself all the way up on this
just
cross.
horrible.
Not to mention however many lashes and beatings he had on his back as he scraped them on.
Yeah.
Like
That's not
that's
a
30
rubbing
seconds.
post. You like to scratch
It's
your
not
back.
like,
No.
hey, can you get that itch for me? And it wasn't quick. It wasn't like, hey, let me just put a bullet in your head and like, thanks for dying for me. Like this was days of a process.
Yikes.
The pain, the suffocation, and the humiliation,
Yeah, like,
unimaginable.
and knowing beforehand that he was going to go through this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine.
Like, yeah.
I mean, it makes sense why he was pleading with God in the garden
please,
before that.
take
Like,
this,
please.
like I know what I'm about to get into, and I really don't. Like, this is not going to be fun at all. And I always, this actually brought to the scripture for me of when they were talking about like, most people won't even die for a good man, let alone a bunch of sinners. Like nobody's going through what Jesus went through for a good person. And he went through that for us in this room before we were ever barely even thought of, which is just wild to think about for a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, take somebody that's familiar to you in your life, helped you out immensely, loved on you, you've seen him do so many good things, and then have him go through something like that for no reason, for no crime. I mean, hard to think about that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, you think about his disciples and what they were expecting him to be as the Messiah, like this warrior savior.
especially to the two guys who were zealots in the disciples.
That was like in their blood,
that was
right?
their MO, was this thought of, I'm going to sacrifice my life to make sure I always take down Rome, because that's what I think God is asking me to do as a zealot. Like, that's where their mind was. And he's saying he's that person, and they're going, huh?
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah. And so watching him just hand over his own life without putting up a fight must have been pretty defeating and confusing.
Oh, for sure. And I'm even like thinking back to like what we just asked everybody to do, like as a Greco-Roman citizen, like how much, like, you know, I'm wondering how much of they like actually saw this. Like, obviously they didn't see some of the things, you know, the steps per se, but like they would have seen King of the Jews sitting on top of there. They would have potentially seen the refusal of, you know, the wine. Like, are they
The disciples, you mean?
No, like even just the people watching that aren't even disciples, like the Romans. Like, are they putting pieces together, or do they not even notice that? And it's not really brought into focus until maybe they get Mark's gospel and like, holy crap, what was I at?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't think we can know, right?
I'm just
Obviously, someone like Mark was able to pull it together.
Sure.
You know, to make that connection, but that's a good question.
I'm just, it'd be interesting, like, and the people in the crowd, like, how many, like, get that, like, oh, man, we just did something really bad. All right, step 7. The emperor ascends the steps between two officials. Which verse is that one in?
He's on the middle cross.
Yeah.
Yeah, 27, verse 27, they crucified 2 rebels with him, one on his right and one on his left.
Which I think is another, like, I think there's just that underlying jab of, like, yeah, Caesar's brought up with 2 officials. I think it was usually, like, a high priest and
head of the
like
military or something, yeah.
And he's got 2 criminals
on
either
These
side.
are your team. This is who you get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to die here on a cross with these 2 people.
Yeah, it's who I'm dying for, basically.
Yeah.
And then step 8, which is crown. The crowd hails Caesar as Lord and God.
Can I choose 2 verses? Cody,
It does. It shows up in a couple.
Yeah. Sorry, Cody. I didn't even give you a chance there. I was like, me.
Yeah,
I'm all waving my hand over here. Me.
I think of the sign up there.
Yeah.
King of the Jews.
Yeah.
So there's that. I also see verse 29. This is again where it gets turned upside down. Instead of hailing him, they're mocking him.
Yeah.
I even in verse 39, it says, surely this man was the Son of God. What's really interesting is that Son of God was actually a term that was used for Caesar. It was something they would refer to him as Son of God because he was the emperor or king. And
he was believed to be a deity. Yeah.
And so that goes back to the emperor worship we talked about, where this would have been an idiom for specifically for Caesar or whichever of the Caesars was in power. Yet this guy, you know, the centurion, you know, back to our question of did anybody realize this was going on, whether he saw the steps or not, something clicked in his mind and went, oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good.
And then the last one is omen from the gods. And so in Roman culture, they would always, like, whenever Caesar was coronated, there was a sign that was expected to come from the gods whenever it was sort of I call it the anointing, the last sort of step to say, hey, yes, this is who we've picked. And everybody would wait for a sign. And so we get that here in
38.
Yes. Actually, it shows up in 2. 33 as well. At noon, darkness came over the whole land.
Yeah, because one of the Caesar's eclipse was the sign.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Which is, like, there's so much in here. Like, we don't have time to, like, peel back every single bit.
Hey, can I jump in with some of the... I said earlier there were some things that stuck out to me. Like,
go for it.
I wonder why they specifically in verse 3 mention noon and 3 in the afternoon. Like, is that significant? I don't know.
I wonder if it has to do with how they Actually, I wonder if it has to do with both how in Jewish culture they kept time and then how in Roman culture they kept time, because they were different.
Mm-hmm. How were do you have?
I don't remember.
Or
I don't remember what it was.
Like the night before, like the watches of the night were explained as the cock crowing.
Yeah.
At certain times. I forget what the specifics are, but like shift changes of the guards at night was like.
But it just seems like a random details to include. Like why?
Well, 3 in the afternoon is repeated twice.
Yeah,
which is even more strange. Like you just said that. Why did you repeat it? Literally, not even. All you did was say 3 in the afternoon and then 3 in the afternoon.
So like that's one of those rabbit trails where I'd be like, I wonder why that's there twice. I'm gonna go look.
Yeah.
We don't have the answer for you today, but
sometimes maybe it's just repeating to put emphasis on.
Could be.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is for Jewish authors. Many times that's what it is. So like if we go back to like Exodus 34, 6, and 7, where it talks about who God is, it says Lord, Lord. I'm like, well, why'd you have to put it there twice? There's an emphasis of Lord as one particular way and then Lord as the other way.
Hey, look, Jesus does it right here too.
Yep. My God, my God.
My God, my God.
Which that's another, I think there's a lot of different opinions or debates out there on what that actually is. The one that, at least for me, that I've sort of gravitated towards is that he's calling out a psalm.
I was going to say, is he referring back to something?
Yeah, I don't remember which one it is. So remember, there were no chapters, there were no verses, there were no title headings in any of the scriptures until
much later.
Most recently, I think.
I think it was just in relationship with his father.
Sure.
And just cried out to him.
Could be.
Yeah.
What other things stuck out, Brandon? Or were those all the ones?
I don't know. Yeah, well, and it's interesting with Jesus's words. Mark puts in, listen, he's calling Elijah. So like I feel like there's some like, tie back to something there.
Somewhere.
Like I don't know. One thing that I've learned like in studying the Gospels, especially where Jesus is talking, there's ties back to a lot of things. Like it's not a lot of just throwing things out. And that's a whole nother topic about how rabbis taught and the fact that people had scripture memorized.
Mm-hmm.
We have the internet now. We can just go look things up easily. But when everything was in oral culture, it was a lot different. So it gets my mind wondering, like, what's going on here? There's probably something deeper to this.
Yeah, it makes me think of how you talked about how you're reading the Bible now, Cody. So the Bible is actually intended to not just be like this factual document of history, of all these comments of how things happened in the earth. It was meant to be experiential.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you'll see where
word.
So you're supposed to wrestle with things.
For sure.
There are intentional places where details are left out and you're like,
it draws
why
you in.
do I not know that?
Mm-hmm.
And then you find out like maybe sometimes several books, many books later, or several verses later, or chapters later, or whatever that is, but it's intended to be like, that's weird. And then you'll read another passage and be like, oh, hey, there's the details to that passage.
Yep.
I'm going to go back. And so it's like this constant go back and read, go back and read, go back and read. And then you just continue to build this context of what is actually going on in the book. And then there's all kinds of other things to peel back the layers of just asking questions on stuff. And so I think what you're doing right now is really cool.
Yeah.
Because I think you're doing the way it was intended.
Yeah. And it's tough for us. We talked about one of the earlier episodes in this series about like how Mark is easy for us to read because it's written in like a logical, linear fashion more so than the other books of the Bible. But Jesus and his disciples, that wasn't how they were used to telling stories, receiving stories, thinking about stories. It was more in the fashion of how Billy was talking about. And what's really cool is even today, there's resources out there where you can go listen to like modern day Jewish rabbis and thinkers, and that's still the way that they approach the Bible, the Old Testament. So that was just the culture. That's how the authors wrote it, intending it to be approached. So
and we find it so frustrating. why don't you just tell me what it
It
is?
is, right? Like, can I just have the answer?
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's fun. It's kind of like a treasure trail or, adventure, if you will. So
One
Yeah.
thing that makes you want to dig further too is if whatever's going on in your life applies to a verse, and then you are just asking so many more questions.
yeah.
That's relative to you at the moment.
Yeah.
So you might dig in, all up in a verse just to try to figure out how it applies or gives you answers or,
For sure.
it's good to search.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
So how does this, so after we've read this, we've kind of talked through all 9 steps of the coronation. How does this perspective that we read this story, how do we see this being a challenge to the Roman culture and that worldview?
I think in a lot of ways, you mentioned earlier in the list of like, imagine if we were a Greco-Roman citizen, like about power.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in that list, one of the things is what we view as like power and strength is being challenged by what Mark's doing here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that directly applies to our world today because our view of power hasn't changed much. Changed much. Seems a little less gory maybe, but when Jesus is, in the Sermon on the Mount, when he talks about like nonviolent ways of approaching conflict. Yeah.
Big time. Like I'm seeing the challenge of like, obviously at the end, the conclusion that I think Mark wants you to come to is that this is the king. This is who is more of a king than any king will ever have on earth. Yet you're looking up to this earthly person who you've quote unquote deified, who's not deified at all, who will die and will never come back and will wipe away. Yet this person, now we obviously haven't gotten to the part of the resurrection yet, but I'm imagining like them reading this and then even maybe, hearing of the stories of him coming back, even if they didn't see him, of being like, whoa, holy crap. What is going on? Like that, this idea of it, the ultimate king, like I'm thinking is going through their minds of like, who have I been serving? Potentially. I'm even thinking of, even back to the power thing. Think of how much power it took for Jesus to sit up there. When he was, at the time, the most powerful human on the earth at that. Like, he could have stepped down. He could have ripped the nails out. He could have stepped down. He could have stopped it at any point in time that he ever wanted. And, like, that was just this amazing, almost this display of power under...
If I step down for me, and it ruins it for everybody else, and that's what I'm here to do.
So that's just a few, I think. I mean, obviously it challenges every single one of the points of that culture that we talked about, but like sit in that for a little bit. Just kind of think about like what this story would have meant, even how it maybe even challenges your own worldview today.
Yeah. Stepping back into the Roman world at the time, we talked about Caesar being the son of God. He was a deity. So if you turn around, like if you see this story that Mark is painting and you start tracking with it and you start seeing the connections, you're like, oh, wait, and Mark, through the story he's put together, convinces you that Caesar isn't the real king. It's this other guy, Jesus. Like, that puts you in kind of like a difficult, uncomfortable spot almost. Like, all of a sudden, your home, your culture, everything you knew that you were comfortable with, it puts you at odds with it.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, you're like, what do I do with this?
Yeah. How am I supposed to live my life now?
Yeah.
In a very similar way, I think it does that for us today too, though.
For sure.
Stepping into, what does culture say? and tell us how we're supposed to act, what we're supposed to follow, what we're supposed to chase, what we're supposed to believe in, versus what Jesus tells us. I think the point is, I don't think much has changed. Like, we're in a very, like, our culture is in a very similar spot that the Romans were in, of like, it challenges the way in which you live your life.
You know what? I think you're absolutely correct, but this thought just came to mind. I wonder if that's why I love the church, by the way, not trying to criticize it, but I guess I am a little bit. I wonder if that's how, like, our kind of modern day Western evangelical Christian has evolved, is that we've turned it into something where we don't have to feel threatened by it. Because I think there's this pervasive mindset of like, all I need to do is accept salvation. I don't want to downplay that, because that is absolutely important in the first step. But I think so many Christians in the Western world today, it's like, that's where they stop and they're good.
Yeah, then I can just do whatever I want.
And so none of the challenges that we're talking about, like if you accept that, who Jesus is, and now feel like you need to model your life at him, what that means and how you're going to be confronted by culture, like we just cut that out.
Yeah, you don't need to be different. We're just going to let that one sit there, because I think that one's the one to sit in for quite a while.
I'm speaking to myself here too. Sure. I'm not criticizing from this side of the mic.
No, it's easy to get into, I just have this blanket of grace that's on me all the time and I can do whatever I want. But even, I mean, is it Paul that talks about that? It says, now do I just get to live my life however I want to? No, not at all. That's not what grace is for.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot to wrestle with, I think, there.
Yeah, you're covered by grace so that you can help bring kingdom, which is to this world, which is doing all the stuff we're talking about. I didn't see the conversation going this way, Billy, but here we are.
Oh, well, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoyed just kind of seeing the Easter story from a hopefully completely different perspective. Because at the end of the day, this isn't a story of defeat. It's a story of triumph. This would have rocked the Romans' world, and it should still rock our world in 2025 today. And in many ways, I don't think it does. And so defeat is not strength in the Roman mind. And I think similar today, defeat is not, quote unquote, a strength. But the way in which Jesus died to conquer the evil of the world is the way in which the new kingdom will be ushered in. We, Christians, are to sacrifice just as he did. Strong-arming people, marginalizing people is not the way of the kingdom. Jesus was the most powerful man on the planet at the time, and he could have stopped it like we talked about. He could have harnessed his power. He could have pulled the nails out. He could have told them to stop. He could have just spoke words and it would have all been over. But he chose to conquer evil in a completely different way. So if you're a Christ follower, I want to remind you that you have the same power living inside you. And it's our choice to figure out how we harness that and use that. And if you're not a Christ follower, I want you to know that this power is available to you. Should you choose to accept it? Should you choose to accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, and from what we've talked about of how he died on the cross? And so as we end this episode, I want to ask the question that we won't answer, but I want you guys to, if you're listening, just to sit with, how might you use the power that's available to you to harness it in the same way that Jesus did in our daily lives? Thanks for listening, y'all. We'll catch you on the next episode.